This is another type of warfare, new in its intensity, ancient in its origin, war by guerrillas, subversives, insurgents, assassins, war by ambush instead of by combat, by infiltration instead of aggression, seeking victory by eroding and exhausting the enemy instead of engaging him. It is a form of warfare uniquely adapted to what has been strangely called wars of liberation, to undermine the efforts of new and poor countries to maintain the freedom that they have finally achieved. It preys on economic unrest and ethnic conflicts. It requires, in those situations where we must counter it, and these are the kinds of challenges that will be before us in the next decade, if freedom is to be saved, a whole new kind of strategy, a wholly different kind of force, and therefore a new and wholly different kind of military training.
Much of the traditional wars we think of involve armies massed in an area ready to fight each other, with cities like Arnhem, Stalingrad, and Berlin being some of the most recognizable from the last World War. Unconventional warfare dominated much of the early 2000s. It is a leviathan created from many moving and increasingly complicated parts. Prepping is a subculture dedicated to preparing for the worst, and indeed, war is one of the worst things a human can endure. The Russian invasion of Ukraine is an ongoing example of a traditional type of war, but there's a twist. Despite the fact that the combatants are two professional armies fighting against each other, the tactics and strategies are far from traditional. We can understand the broader future implications of the shift we're seeing by examining two important works regarding irregular or unconventional warfare. The first book is considered by many to have influenced many people within the conventional forces to think outside of the box. In 1965, Robert Taber released a book called The War of the Flea. Unconventional warfare was certainly not new, but examining it from the ideological perspective of a guerrilla fighter, for many people, certainly was. Robert actually followed Fidel Castro and Che Guevara as a CBS investigative journalist on their march to Havana. His dated perspective of revolutionaries bringing about power to the people is certainly present in the book, but reading it gives an understanding and insight into the formative building blocks of the modern ideas of counterinsurgency. What would it take to have people rally to your side for a cause, their motivations, and their expected outcomes? The second book deals with the lessons learned during the Great War on Terror and was released in 2015. Out of the Mountains by David Kilcullen deals with low-intensity conflicts, non-governmental organizations, and urban and guerrilla warfare. While it's not 100% accurate in regards to the war we see in Ukraine and the cold fifth-generation warfare of information being waged from all sides today, it touches on some very important aspects of how someone can become even better prepared for their region in case things go sideways. Studying both books, what they got wrong, and more importantly, what they got right, helps us plot a trajectory. By knowing the rough direction we are headed in, we can then prepare in a more efficient and prudent way. The most serious drawback to The War of the Flea is that it's dated and doesn't deal with the conclusion and struggles within a power vacuum that's left behind in a destabilized region. The romance of revolution is gone when you can't feed your family. It is understood that this book was written in the context of one man speaking from what he saw in Latin America in the mid-60s from an idealistic vantage point. This means it also cautions against other rumors of interventions in Vietnam. Since the book was published, the study of the motives behind insurgency, guerrilla warfare, and low-intensity conflict, and where this all fits in with warfare as a whole, has become a large field of study in its own right. The most important thing that can be taken away from this small book is that emotion and idealism can lead people to act even if the action is detrimental to themselves, so long as they believe their cause is correct. Learning the cues and signs of a society becoming increasingly irrational in their thought processes, while simultaneously dehumanizing another group, is worth going down the rabbit hole on. Seeing the issues within Vietnam that led to war, the killing fields of Cambodia, the aftermath of the March to Havana, the formation of present-day Iran, they all have one thing in common: a figurehead who can latch onto the minds of people, an important ally or devastating opponent. It wouldn't even need to be a person who courts the vast majority of people. They would only need to gain the loudest, the most prominent, and the ones most likely to perform actions that further the desired end result. Human nature, being what it is, shows us that most of the time, even if someone claims they're acting under the motive of altruism, it's simply a mask they've used to secure a comfortable, powerful, and stable existence for themselves. At least, in their minds. If The War of the Flea is dated, Out of the Mountains is less so, seeing that it was released relatively recently. The US riots of 2020, the fall of Afghanistan, and the current war in Ukraine might have helped prove the relevancy of some of its old criticisms. One of its important points is to treat each city as its own unit of analysis. Studying a local area, the disposition of its people, and local strengths and weaknesses has proved to be crucial to success in many places. The book states that there would also be increased instances of irregular warfare, with the overall understanding that people desire stability, safety, along with the ability to live as they see fit according to their culture. Urban, crowded, and coastal conflict would become more common than the remote, landlocked, and rural battles that America has become used to fighting. A frightening opening salvo of the state of modern warfare with technology and mass media competing with the spread of news via social media was the attack in Benghazi that left 4 Americans dead. Technology is at the forefront of this new war, and the implications are terrifying. There was a bit about the way American military drones could launch missiles against an intended target, and the nature of deeming something a legitimate tactic in warfare on page 174 that stated, "If we consider it a legitimate act of war for a predator to strike a target, if it's legitimate to kill a militant attending a wedding in the tribal areas, is it also legitimate to kill a predator pilot at his kid's soccer game in Indian Springs?" As I said, terrifying implications. Seeing the drone warfare usage increase not only in the Ukrainian war, but also in the use of drone warfare tactics by Mexican cartels fighting for the supremacy of a region, it's clear that it's only a matter of time before new emerging threats could potentially be countered with seemingly callous parameters for the rules of engagement. Comparing the strength of the state to an armed non-state sanctioned group becomes an essential activity if someone is to understand who is, in fact, in charge. People will support armed groups where those groups are strong enough to create incentives that offer predictability, order, safety, and stability. The book argues that support follows strength, not vice versa. The answer is no longer simply coin operations from the War on Terror era, as not all problems require a military solution. So ultimately, how can a person prepare for all of this? A thorough area study conducted of your region is in order. There are many resources for you to learn how to do this effectively. There is no one-size-fits-all in the way of understanding your local needs as they pertain to you. Your appearance, skills, and demeanor all factor into the decision-making process. You need to build an understanding of the cultural dynamic and power players in your area. Who do people turn to for help in the event of an emergency? What's culturally relevant in your area? And what can speak to the next generation to gain their support? Unless you are part of the ultra-wealthy, you can't buy your way out of these problems. These books are full of relevant information for the prepper of today. Not all lessons will apply, but it helps build a foundation. And if there's one key facet that nearly everyone in every region, regardless of race, creed, or age, has to take to heart, it's this. You must learn how to prioritize resiliency over stability in times of uncertainty. Until the next video, be good, stay safe, and have a good one.